You are listening to the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, where I dive into a series of topics that occupy my anxious mind. I'm Sam Madore, overthinker extraordinaire. This week, I'm overthinking with Lenore Zann about feeling enough. Lenore is an award-winning actress. She was an elected official for 12 years here in Nova Scotia as an MLA and an MP, and she is the voice of Rogue on X-Men. Here's our chat. I am here with Lenore Zann. Hey, Lenore.
Hello, my darling. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Coming to us from Orlando.
Yes.
I'm jealous.
And while I did go to Universal Studios for one day, I was actually working the whole time. So
Right. So I won't be too jealous of your tan and the sun beaming in on your face right now. Okay.
I know. Yeah.
I love it.
And well, I got that in Australia because I went home
Yes.
to see my beautiful Zann family,
Awesome.
who I hadn't seen in many, many years because I was born in Australia and we moved to Canada.
Yeah.
And my dad recently passed away, as you probably know.
I did know. Yeah.
So
Sorry about
I
that.
decided to go and see my family, his family, and all of us grieve and celebrate him together.
Oh my gosh. He was just, and of course, I didn't know your dad very well, Lenore, but he was a presence. Anywhere that I saw him and him and your mom were always together. Anytime I saw them together, he was just always so super friendly and just a lovable, just caring person.
He loved people and he was
Yeah.
a storyteller. So,
Sometimes you'd get stuck in a conversation with your dad and it would be hard to get out.
I know, right? Because he could just go on, right? But
Yeah.
I come by it honestly. So, I get it from him.
Yeah, well, he was lovely. And I have seen your mom actually. I've seen your mom more than I've seen you lately.
Yes.
I saw her at the Truro Farmers Market a little while ago and she's looking good, but obviously I'm sure not, having a hard time as well.
Yeah, I'm glad she's getting out and about because you and I both know that grieving is a process.
It sure is.
Yeah.
We're recording this on Valentine's Day, and I believe this episode will actually be out close to the anniversary of my mom's death, Lenore. And it's coming up on 4 years, and I
Wow.
cannot even believe it. Like it's
All right.
shocking. Yeah.
I was thinking about you today before we started this, and
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, my dad, it was last February, a year ago, that he got sick.
Yeah.
And that we had to go over to Spain and spend time with him in a hospital there, and then he got sent back over home. But he was in hospitals for like 8 months, and he passed
Yeah.
away in October. But it's hard to believe that it was like a year ago that he got sick. And I was thinking about you and
Yeah.
your grieving process and your dear mother, and how long that had been. And does it ever go away? Like, does it ever go? Do you ever go, oh, that was a really long time ago, I'm okay now? Or does it just always stay fresh, like it happened yesterday?
Honestly, both, because I think there's some days that it feels like it's been almost 4 years, and sometimes it feels like it was yesterday. And I don't think that it's ever going to go away. And I think that's a good thing in a twisted kind of way.
And was your mother also sick for a while?
Yeah, my mom had cancer, and it was breast cancer, and then it turned into brain cancer. And it was when she got the brain cancer diagnosis that we knew that it was terminal. And but we still thought we had more time. I mean, I think you
Mm,
always kind of hope for that, right? And she was only 59 when she died.
gosh,
Yeah.
young woman, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard, and so many people are suffering right now,
Yeah.
losing people. I mean, the
Hmm.
pandemic was one thing. So many people passed away during that,
Yeah.
and so many people were unable to grieve or unable to be
Oh,
with
yeah.
them in the hospital or even to say goodbye.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how painful that would
I
be.
can't either. And we were, I'm going to say lucky, and I'm putting that in air quotes. We were lucky because Mom died on the 17th of March
Mhm.
and everything shut down like a couple days later. So
Wow.
thank God we could all be with her. We're all
Right.
a very, like you, we're all a close
Mm.
family.
Yeah,
And so, how do you choose who gets to be there and who doesn't?
exactly. Especially if you're only like
God.
two people or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Crazy.
I just feel that the whole world right now is going through so much angst, anxiety,
Yeah,
fear, trauma, trauma upon trauma. And my heart really goes out to, humankind for
yeah,
what we've had to go through and what we're still going through.
absolutely. How do you find that on the road? Like you've been doing a lot of touring right now, Lenore, with your Comic-Con tour with Rogue and
Yeah.
X-Men.
Yeah.
How are you finding dealing with the grief and also just dealing with all of the heaviness of the world while you're out? Maybe it's helping you to be out on the road.
It is. I mean, it's a huge distraction. And
Hmm.
I've discovered that I am very task oriented. I love
Right.
having tasks. I love being given a list of tasks that I need to like do things and
Yep.
focus on it and tick them off and get them done in a timely fashion. And if I have a deadline, it's even better.
Oh, me too.
Because if I don't have a deadline, then, it could get sort of pushed aside. But it's good because it focuses my mind and I don't feel anxious and I don't feel depressed. I
Mm,
feel like I'm purposeful, and
yeah.
I love that feeling. So, it's interesting. I realized in this last trip, because I'm also, we talked a little bit about it before we came on, but I'm also writing my memoir, which,
Yes.
yeah, which is, the first time I've ever written a book. I've written a play before, and I've
Hmm.
written short stories, and I've written stories for newspapers, like about different topics.
Yeah.
But my first book, and I realized that, yes, I'm very task oriented. And I realized that's what made me good in government, in politics too, because I'd have a list of things that I needed to get through. And
Yeah.
I would wake up and I would start going through my list. I wouldn't have any time in the morning to be hesitant about, oh, how do I feel right now? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling depressed? I would just have to like the alarm clock would ring and bang, I'd be up out of bed and on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And then I'd be on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I realized that was really good in the sense that it kept my mind occupied. But
Hmm.
once that ended, I started to feel like I was in free fall. So
Right.
before I knew I had the X-Men or a movie to do, or even had decided that I would ever get it together to write a book, as soon as I didn't have the job anymore of being an MLA or an MP, I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know
Right.
what to do with my time. I would be like, well, what am I going to do all day?
Yeah. You didn't have that
All
checklist.
day, right?
Yeah.
So I bet a lot of people can relate to that too, because either if you retire, or
Mhm.
even if, God help you, you got your job, you got fired, and suddenly you don't have a job, you're unemployed, and you're going,
Yeah.
but now what? It's really hard.
So
So,
how scary, like I feel like there's a lot of fear that goes along with that. How
sure,
scary was that?
it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And the funny thing is, it makes me think back to when I first like got sober. When I got sober, it'll be 28 years ago this April.
Shut up.
I
That's
haven't had a drink of
amazing.
alcohol since then. Yeah. And I remember someone asking me at the time before I quit drinking, how do you feel? And I said, I am I'm so full of fear. And they were
Hmm.
like, "Well, what are you afraid of?" And I said, life.
Hmm.
And the thing is, I wasn't afraid of death. In
Yeah.
fact, death almost seemed like something that was welcome to me at that time,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to feel, I didn't want to think, I didn't want to feel my emotions, which is why I drank, and why
Right.
many people who are addicts of any sort could be, it could be behavioral addicts, shopping, debting, using a credit card instead of
Mm,
money, and just keeping on building up your debt until finally you're like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed with all this debt. How am I going to get out of it? I mean,
mhm.
that's addictive behavior too.
Yeah.
Compulsive gambling, sex, and then of course all of the different substances.
Yeah.
So I realized that deep down, that fear, that anxiety about life and not being able to deal with whatever life throws at us is kind of at the bottom of all of the addictions and also
Yeah.
codependence. And I realized, okay, I have to now deal with that feeling, that fear that's underneath all of that. And I don't drink anymore. So, how do I deal with it? And
Right.
I threw myself into work. I mean,
Yeah.
I just worked.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an addiction too.
Well, you're reading my mind. I was just going to say that. And it's
Right.
also, yeah, it's like you don't know what life is like without that thing. So that thing at the time, 28 years ago, was drinking. That thing, what was it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
Yeah,
2 years
3 years
ago,
ago now.
three
Yeah.
years ago was work. So you
Right.
don't know what that's going to feel like. So that's the fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do realize, even as I'm really grateful for the fact that I'm busy and I am working right now, that I have to be aware that it can't just all be about the work. It has to also be about finding an emotional balance
Yes.
and being kind to myself, and finding ways to deal with the anxiety and the depression, without just reverting back to, oh, I just need to be busy. Let me go to another job. Let me
Yes.
keep flying around and going from this job to that Comic Con to that Comic Con. I mean, yes, I'll take the work, and yes, make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah.
But I also realize that I have to keep an eye on my mental health and my emotional health while I'm doing this, and realize that, yeah, meditating, um,
Mm.
going to meetings when I get the chance, going to 12-step meetings,
Yep.
reading books that are about people like us who, we like to be busy, and we like to fill every little second with things.
Yep. Yep. I like how you said us. You know that I'm in the
Right.
same boat. Yep.
And I'll bet you anything, there's a lot of people
Oh,
watching
yes.
right now who can relate,
Yeah.
right?
100%. It's that whole, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's that whole mentality that we always have to be busy or always have to be producing something.
Exactly. We
And
can be productive.
yeah.
And
And
if
it's
you're not
just,
productive, you feel like, well, I'm not as good as everybody else. There must be
yeah,
something wrong with me,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
Point two, where one of the things I have to say to myself is, when is enough enough?
Mm,
And the thing is, like, like people who keep buying things or acquiring things, like, when is enough enough? But for me, it's also about, I need to realize that I am enough. I don't need
right.
to keep proving myself to others, or to myself, or to, for instance, my mother, that I
Hmm.
am enough. I have to realize I am enough just as I am. And that's a
Yeah.
hard one. I find that hard.
It is really hard.
I'm just like constantly feeling like I'm never going to be good enough.
There's going to be a lot of people listening to you say that, Lenore, and completely be shocked to hear you say that. And I so appreciate that vulnerability because, we talk a lot about on here at this podcast, I talk a lot about how, mental illness doesn't have a face and those self-doubts don't have a face. Like it can be anybody. You have no clue, like when you look at somebody, how they're feeling about themselves or about the moment that they're in.
Exactly. Exactly. And to be honest, like a lot of these, movie stars and singers that are really well known, and people look at their social media and they go, "Oh, look, they've got everything. They
Mm,
must be so happy. They've got everything. I wish I was them. I wish I was in their situation." You have no idea what they're going through, and you
no.
have no idea what their mental health really is like.
Yeah.
And and we can all put up happy pictures of us doing this, that, and the other thing. But what are we really feeling, you know, the rest of the time?
That's right.
And how do we soothe ourselves? Like I also had a revelation this week too, writing my book, going back, looking at, you know, the past and childhood. And I realized, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about my dad, you know, and I remember I am a night owl. I love staying up. I love being up late. I am not a morning person. Everybody who knows me knows that. But I can go for hours. I can go for 24 hours, no nonstop, no problem. And I can do it quite a few times in a row. And that comes in handy when you're doing movies and things like that,
Right.
or writing a book. You know, like I started at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon the other day, and I looked at my clock and it was like 6 o'clock the next morning, right?
Holy
I've
crap.
been writing the whole time. I was in the zone.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about, okay, when did that start? And I realized I was a night owl when I was a kid. I didn't want to go to sleep. I didn't want to go to bed. And I'd be lying in bed and they'd put the light out and they'd be like, okay, you have to go to bed. And I'd be like, after a little while, I remember I would always call out for dad. I'd be like, Daddy, Dad. Dad. And dad would have to come in and I'd be like, I can't sleep. And he's like, oh, okay, well, how about a story? And then he would tell me a story or read me a story. And
Yeah.
I realized two things. One, I was kind of unable to self-soothe. I
Right.
needed someone else to come and do it. And for me, it was my dad. And so I'm thinking, yeah, right. So I need to learn how to soothe myself. So I'm listening to I'm listening to recordings of meditation, sleep
Yep.
meditation, try and go to sleep every night. And that helps,
Awesome.
right? But I also realized that when dad was in his last several months and I was reading books to him, he loved murder mysteries, and I was reading to him and his eyes would start to close in his hospital bed and he'd start to snore and I'd be thinking, okay, he's out now, and I'd be like, Dad, you still with me? And he'd be like, I'm still. I'd be like, Dad, okay, I'm gonna go now. Oh, no, another one. He just want another chapter.
So then the role was reversed.
Right?
You were soothing him to
Exactly.
sleep. Oh my gosh, that's adorable.
It was so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I felt blessed that I had that
Oh
opportunity
my
to do
gosh.
that for him and have it come full circle.
That's so beautiful. And your dad was also a writer too, hey?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how it's
Yeah.
really cool now that I mean, and I obviously you were already in the works of writing a memoir, or at least thinking of writing a memoir while he was still here, but how
Yeah.
great is that to be able to sort of carry on that writing legacy as well?
It's amazing. And, yesterday I was also thinking about him and thinking I had a call from my publisher. So I've got a publisher. It's going to be published
Yes.
by Pottersfield Press,
Excellent.
Leslie Choice, and will be distributed by Nimbus. And Leslie called to say, okay, I need this, and this from you. That's when I came up with my list. And he was like, okay, and we need to figure out what's going to be on the cover, like the photo. We needed to figure out the title and the cover image. And I had something that I'd already had in mind that I sent him, and he loved it. And I'd had like a picture, a photo session done in Cape Breton with the photographer who actually took my pictures for my first wedding, which was really quite beautiful. That
Oh, okay.
got to be the one, he and his wife got to do the photo for the book.
Yep.
And but so talking to him and getting excited about it's going to be ready for the fall and all this stuff. And then I got off the phone and I was like, oh, I would so love to call my dad right now. He
Yes.
would be so excited.
100%. I can feel that. Like as you were saying it, I knew where you were going with that, and I
Yeah,
can feel it
he would be
because
so excited.
there's so many times that you just want to pick up the phone and just be like, "Hey, mom, hey, dad,"
Yeah,
and it's such a
it
that's the
is.
hardest part.
It really is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so he was aware of it. He encouraged me. He encouraged me to write way back when, poetry and short stories to start with.
Yeah.
And then when I told him that I was going to write a book and I wanted it to be a memoir, he was like, great, awesome. And he's the one who suggested that I contact Pottersfield Press, because
Okay.
he knew them and they had already published a short story that I'd written actually
Oh,
about Dad. They contacted me back 4 or 5 years ago and asked if I'd do a short story for an anthology they were putting together called
yeah.
The Nova Scotian Book of Fathers. And so they were getting different people that were people who are known in Nova Scotia to write a story about their dads. And so
Okay.
I wrote one about Dad called Zann and the Art of Tennis, because he played tennis. He was a
Did
really,
he? Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So it was called Zen, like Zen in the Art of Archery. Only this is Zan in the Art
Yeah,
of.
yeah. I
So,
love it.
so Dad said, "Yeah, why don't you contact them? Contact Leslie. I bet you anything he'd love to publish your memoir." So I did,
Oh,
and he
that's
did.
awesome.
So yeah,
So he's still part of it. I mean, that's the
yeah,
beauty of it, right? Is
yeah,
he's still here and he's still part of it for sure.
yes.
And
Mm,
so I have to ask, because when you're going through it, like you said, you're looking for where do I go from here?
mm.
When that happens publicly, like I don't know what that feels like, because like if I leave a job or if I'm struggling or if whatever that looks like, I'm not gonna say nobody cares, but
I care. I care. I've paid attention. I have been paying attention.
people
Believe.
who care about me care, but the public doesn't care, the general public. How much harder does that make it when it's a public thing for you? Or I guess you
Um,
don't really have a comparison, maybe.
well, it's hard because, to be honest, it's weird. When I lost the last election, because I had, you know, when I first decided I was going to run the very, very first time, a lot of people, including my mother and my sister, told me I was crazy and I would
Mm.
never win. Like there was no way ever that I would ever win, and especially for the NDP in Truro. But but my dad said, "What have you got to lose?" And that was my attitude. That's always been my
Yeah.
attitude. What do you got to lose? And so surprisingly, I won.
Hmm.
And then I won two more times provincially. And then I went federal and won a fourth time for the Liberals and Prime Minister Trudeau in Truro, a conservative, a
I
traditional
know.
conservative town.
Yeah.
So, after doing 4 consecutive terms in office, um, going for a fifth time, it was devastating. And the feeling that I felt more than anything was shame and that I had let people down. And that is a really hard one to get beyond. Like
That's the worst.
I just felt like shamed. And I felt like, there was so much negativity and anger and horrible things being written about me on social media, and they were just being shared a million times. And I felt like, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, when they send Cersei, whip her naked through the streets with a shaved head, going shame, shame, shame. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Uh, Other people may not have seen it that way, but
Doesn't
mentally,
matter.
that's how I felt,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
that was really, really hard, but
So how does that, like,
doesn't
how do
kill you,
you,
makes you stronger.
right, fair enough. Yeah, but I mean, geez, in that moment though,
Mm,
how do you piece through that?
I
Like
didn't
knowing, like you said, you've struggled with addiction before and you obviously don't want to go down that route
know.
again.
No,
Like obviously you have a close network of people in this community who love you and care for you and don't give a shit whether you're MLA or
yeah,
MP or whatever.
that's true.
But how do you kind of work your way through that?
Well, I really had to just sort of, I had to just let myself free fall for a while. I just had
Mm,
to not do anything. I
yeah.
had to just like not go out, not see people,
Hmm.
not check social media, not talk to anybody, not
Yeah.
even my family. Like I just didn't want to see anybody or talk to anybody.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sleep. And to be honest, I suddenly realized I was so tired and that I'd
Yeah.
been like pushing myself for, 12 years with no break.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to sleep and I wanted to stay in bed. And I thought, Well, Brian Wilson apparently stayed in bed for a year. I wonder if I could stay in bed for a whole year like Brian Wilson.
And
Like,
then Bare Naked Ladies will write a song
right,
about you.
right, like stay in bed for a whole year like Brian Wilson did. It's like that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And but here's the funny thing, So about 3 weeks after the election loss, and again, like for people who are listening, it's not just about like the election, it's about a job. Like you're
Yeah.
doing a job, you're going full tilt boogie, working day in, day out, night and day for hours upon end, and then suddenly you're not. And
Yes.
and you have no income
Yeah. Yeah.
coming in. That's hard. And so so 3 weeks after it happened, I was just checking emails just to see what was going on. And this email came in from Barrie Dunn, who was in the Trailer Park Boys as an
Yep.
actor and also produced the Trailer Park Boys. And he wrote me this email. He said, Lenore, I am so sorry that you lost the election. You were our champion of the arts and the environment and all these great things. And we're so sorry. But does this mean that you could now play a lead in my next feature film?
He's like, sorry about all that, but I've got an agenda here
Right?
for you. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
I was like, I mean, I hadn't really acted in quite a while. So I wrote him back. I said, well, I'd be interested. What is it? He said, can I send you a script? I said, yes. And he sent me the script, and it was the Madones. And there was a character in there called Gladys Madone, and she's wild and crazy, and she's hilarious, and she's totally out there. And I loved her. I just loved her. And I went, well, I love the part of Gladys. He went, it's yours.
Was that the part he was thinking of for you too? I bet it was,
He
hey?
was thinking that there was two characters. There's the character of the lead character who she has become the caretaker of her younger sister,
Right.
who has schizophrenia. And he thought that I would also be good for that role because I have played roles like that as well in movies in the past.
Yeah.
But I just felt that for everything I was going through emotionally and just I didn't really want to have to worry about carrying a movie my
Yeah.
first time out of the gate after
Yeah.
not acting for a while. So Gladys just seemed like a lot of fun and
Yeah.
something that I easily slip into. And so the next thing I know, he was like, yeah, we're gonna be shooting it in like February, like again, February in
Yeah.
Nova Scotia.
Wow.
And that
Yeah.
was 2 years ago. So that happened. And so that gave me something that I didn't necessarily have to get out of bed, but it made me get up out of bed and make a cup of coffee and come back and read the script and study the script.
Right.
I
Yep.
still wasn't ready to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And then
But it gave you focus.
it gave me something to focus. It was just something, a little nugget to look
Yeah.
forward. And then after that, I got another email, this time from a gentleman that I had met in the United States, who's from LA, who had invited all of the X-Men actors, the original X-Men actors, to come and do a Comic-Con out in Texas before the pandemic hit.
Right.
And he said, hey, Lenore, I'm just reaching out. A friend of mine is a casting director in Hollywood, and she was asking me if I knew how to get a hold of you because Disney is going to be doing a new animated series, and they're very interested in talking to you about it. And I'm like, huh? What? This sounds like something out of a movie. Like
Something made up. Yeah.
like this can't be real. And
Yeah.
and I didn't know him that well. And I was like, well, if this is real,
You're like, am I being punked? Is somebody like gonna
right,
jump out? Yeah.
exactly, or is it really happening? Is it really Disney? I mean, you never know, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if it's real, then give her my phone number and tell her to call me. And she did. And it turned out that this woman, Meredith Lane, was the casting director, and she was working for Disney. And she asked if she could send me a script of a little monologue or two to read, and put it on tape and send it back to her, because they didn't say what the show was. They said it's highly secretive. So please don't tell anybody, but could you audition and then send it back to us? And if they like what they hear, then we'll take the next steps. So I
Yeah.
was like, sure, So then she sent me the script, and I could tell from the lines this was rogue in the X-Men, because they were lines I'd already done in shows
Right.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
I recognized it immediately, even though the name wasn't there or anything like that. They wanted a Southern accent,
Yeah.
sexy voice, Southern accent, same as it was originally. So I just did them like the way I do,
Yeah.
sent it back. And again, I was like, well, if something happens, it happens. And then about maybe a month later, I got another call from her saying, well, Lenore, these producers really want to meet you. Can we do a Zoom meeting? They really want to talk to you further about this. I was like, sure. So then we got on the Zoom meeting. The producers were so kind and sweet, and they were like, Lenore, we love your work. We are huge fans. And we would love it if you would be part of our show and reprise your role of Rogue for this new animated series that Marvel and Disney are
How
doing called
cool.
97.
That is so cool. What was the timing on that again? Sorry, that was right before the pandemic?
No, I had gone out to a Comic-Con before the pandemic.
Oh, sorry.
And
Gotcha.
I met a guy there who brought us out
Right.
to Texas. And then so several years later, after the pandemic, after I
Yeah.
lost the election, that's when I got this email from him saying, hey, would you be
So
interested in this
crazy.
thing? So it happened about 2 months after after that last lost election. So it was kind of like,
I
I
gotta
said,
tell you,
like the universe
I was
works
just gonna
serious,
say that.
right?
The universe was looking out for you there. Like that time, I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
I totally believe in that. Like I feel like,
yeah.
you had your moment to just to
Fall
sleep,
apart.
to think about sleeping for a year, or
Yeah,
staying in bed for a year.
yeah.
And then the universe was looking out for you for sure.
And it kind of gave me a feeling of solace that, okay, I must have done something right along the way for
Yeah.
this all this good stuff to be happening. And I mean, let's keep in mind too, I was also grieving because my
Mhm.
sweet little niece had just died.
Yeah, that's
Little
right.
Maya had just died from cancer, osteosarcoma, in June. And then the election was called in August. And then I lost like a month later. And so I was like
Wow.
really, really, really grieving.
Yeah.
And so this gave me hope that
Yeah.
maybe there is a method to all of this madness, and maybe I have a purpose after all.
Well, and it just, I mean, at the root of it too, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it's sort of like it would, if that were me, I would feel like, okay, people still like me.
Yes, right. They like me. You really like me.
Right? Because I feel like, I
Yeah.
mean, if that's the thing, if you struggle with feeling like you're good enough, and then all of a sudden Barrie Dunn reaches out, and then this guy about Comic-Con or about X-Men, like it's just like, okay, like you
Mhm.
said, I've done something right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that that you are being, given something that you maybe deserve, as opposed to I am worthless, I am unworthy, I never work
Yes.
ever again in my life, and I might as well just die now.
Yeah. Oh, that's so hard.
It
And
is.
especially grieving because you grieve the loss of the election too. That's grief as
Yeah.
well, right? It's like that's I think the biggest thing that people learned during the pandemic was that grief doesn't have to be death of a person. It can be loss of connection. It can be
Yeah.
loss in so many other ways.
Yeah. Loss of connections with all the people, loss of
Yeah.
that. Like, we really are social creatures,
Yeah.
humans, right? We really are social creatures. And so when we are stuck in our own homes, in our own worlds, no one everybody was feeling like, what do I do now? What
Yeah.
do I do now? I mean, through the pandemic, I was lucky in the sense that I had a job. I was working in government. So I was busy every single day task, click it off, click it off, click it off, right?
Yeah.
Morning till night. But other people did not have that. They were worried about how they were going to put
Yeah.
food on the table, which was why we came up with that CERB. In the
Mm-hmm.
first place, was thinking of all the people who could not get out and work.
Yeah.
know? Like, what are you
Yeah.
going to do? If you're not allowed to work, you can't get out and do anything. How do you pay for things? How do you not lose your house?
Yeah.
You feed your kids, so you have to think of all of those things when you're in government too, and try to do
Mm-hmm.
what's best for the people.
And being under the microscope, right? Like that's the other piece. It's like if you're trying to do your best, you're trying to do what's best for all the people that, are counting on you, but
Yeah.
obviously you can't please everyone and people are
No,
watching.
yeah. And that's
So
one thing.
hard.
It's a hard lesson for any politician to learn, that you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
you know, and for those of us who also worry about how people think, people pleasers, yeah, like not everybody's gonna like you.
Yeah.
It's
That's
hard.
I haven't learned that lesson yet, Lenore. I think I do, and then I turn a corner and I'm like, "Oh no, there's that old feeling." Okay.
Right. Exactly. I know the feeling too, because I'm a people pleaser too.
Yeah.
I
It's like,
know
"Why
that.
don't you like me?"
I know, right? And then you finally realize, but you have to realize it over and over and over again. It's not about you. It's
No.
their stuff.
And I will say, and I've said this before, it does get better with age. Like I know that sounds like a cliche, but like I feel
Yeah.
like in my 40s now, I do feel like those feelings are fewer and farther between than they used to be, which I'm grateful for sure.
And I know it's hard for young people, because it's all about the peers. It's all about
Oh,
what people think of me.
and social media and how you
Yeah,
look and filters and all of that. It's exhausting to just even look at it, honestly.
I know. And I mean, I've learned so many good lessons in 12-step groups, but in like Al-Anon, for instance,
Hmm.
they say what other people think of me is none of my business.
Yes. It's so true.
What other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah.
It's out of my control.
Yeah.
I can't help that what they think of me.
Yeah.
So I
It's
just
so true. And it's like, but yeah, it's true, but it's hard to get.
It is. And
Yeah.
like I said, you have to keep learning it over and
Yeah.
over again, and also I think too, even in our families of origin, all of the dynamics that go into the family, and enmeshment and codependency and all of those kinds of things, it takes a lifetime to unravel all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. All you have to unlearn a lot of things for sure.
You do, especially
Yeah.
because, when people learn something from an early age, they just think, oh, this is normal. This is the way everybody is.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
This is, the way, everybody treats their siblings or their parents or their children. Well, actually, no, it's not. Same with
No.
drinking. Like my
Oh.
family were not alcoholics, but like my dad was, but he controlled it. He was a controlled drinker until he didn't have a job anymore, when he retired. Once he
Mm,
retired, then he would start drinking earlier in the day. So
yeah.
when he was teaching and everything, he wouldn't drink at all during the day, but then he'd go home and he would start cooking, and he'd have some scotch while he was cooking and whatever. And then he'd be toddled to bed. But when you don't have the job anymore, he would start doing that
Yeah.
earlier in the day. And then that's when my mother started realizing, oh, she'd come home from school because she was still teaching, and dad would be sloshed already.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who have really violent alcoholics in their family, who
Yeah.
everybody drinks, and they drink up a storm, and you think, oh, that's normal. But then
Yeah.
you start to realize, when you join like 12-step groups to deal with your own emotional baggage from that, oh, that isn't normal, and not
Yeah.
everybody is like that. Even for me, when I finally quit drinking, I was 36 at the time, but I thought everybody drank. I thought everybody partied. I thought you have to drink to party, because
Right?
I'm from Australia and Nova Scotia. two very high drinking populations
Yeah.
that have, that have we have reputations of, well, we're party animals. But I didn't realize that you don't have to drink to have a good time, and that,
Right.
yeah, not everybody does look for the first bar. Like they're looking for a cup of coffee or something.
And I think too, like you're almost like looked at like you're not drinking. Like if you go
Like,
out
it's
and you're
wrong with you.
right. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of the opposite problem. Like people look at you
right.
strange because you're not, which I don't
True.
appreciate either.
True. Which is why if anyone asks me, well, why aren't you drinking? That's all you want. You just want some soda water, or you just want,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink. And then they're like, oh, okay.
You should be able to say that.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel no shame there. I feel no shame at all
Yeah.
because I've gotten sober. Although in the drinking, when I was still drinking, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of shame,
Right.
and a lot of addictive behavior. It is covering up a lot of shame. There's
Yeah.
shame.
Right. Shame is a big one. That's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I always ask, and you've already given a really good one, but I always ask my guests if they have a quote that they go to, if they kind of need a pick me up or something that, that kind of resonates with them and when they're feeling down to make them feel better. Do you have any quotes that you go to?
Um, I don't have a quote like that, but I do oftentimes say, when I see other people's behavior, I'll say, there, but for the grace of God, go I.
I just got goosebumps on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, even like when I saw Matthew Perry and
I
I saw
know.
that he had died, and they said he was in a jacuzzi, and I was like, yeah, he probably could have been using and fell asleep and just, you know,
Yeah.
and I was like, I could relate. And I know lots of other people who've, imbibed, and then, and I thought, yeah, there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Yeah. It's so true. It could just so easily be us, when you look
Yeah.
at those situations. Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Agreed.
I try not to judge and just instead just, have empathy for them,
Yeah.
especially if they're suffering from any kind of addiction issues or mental health issues.
Yeah.
And but you also, here's another one, you don't want to be a doormat either.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
be a
Yeah.
doormat. So
Addiction is one of the most misunderstood, I think, afflictions. I don't even know what
yeah,
to call it, but I feel like people are judged so harshly for addiction. And
yeah, because
it's,
people think that they decide that they're going to do that. Like,
yeah.
this is a decision. It's a compulsion. I guess we
Yeah.
could call it a disorder.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Can
But
act,
I
yeah,
read Matthew Perry's book too,
yes.
and
Um,
I recommend reading it because it gave me such an insight into addiction that even like and I consider myself to be like, oh, no so knowledgeable and whatever. I've never struggled with addiction, but or so accepting and non-judgmental, but when I read his book, it just gave me a whole different insight into addiction. So I
wow.
recommend it.
You know
Yeah.
what? I should read it. I would love to read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because yeah, I really felt for him. And
Yeah.
I know I have so many friends and so many people who have suffered from addictions in and out of the entertainment industry,
Mhm.
and many of them are not here today.
Yeah. Oh, it's so awful. It's that pressure, right? People just have pressure put on them. And whether it's them putting it on themselves or other feeling that other people are putting it on them, it's just such a hard life when you have your expectations are too high of yourself.
Yeah, like, when
Yeah.
is enough enough?
We go back to that. We've just come full circle, Lenore,
Right? When
in
is
our
enough enough?
conversation. When is enough enough?
And
Yeah.
that's the other thing that I will say, to share with people if they're feeling whatever. We are enough. You are enough.
Yeah.
Don't feel that you're not enough. You are enough just as you are. You have a right to be here. You have a right to be here and to feel your feelings. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't be feeling something. It's your feelings. They can't tell you how to feel. You know?
100%. Yeah,
Mm.
agreed.
Great.
Thank you so much. This was
No
such a great conversation.
problem. Yeah, and maybe we'll have another one down the road.
Yeah, after your memoir comes out.
Yes, after the memoir comes out. So I think we've decided to call it Lenore Zann, A Rogue's Tale.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. That's awesome. Coming out in the fall.
Yeah, coming up.
Awesome.
Oh, all right.
Thanks so much, Lenore.
All right, sweetheart.
All
You are
right.
enough. Just remember that.
Thanks again to Lenore for overthinking with me about feeling enough. And just a reminder that you are enough. And I'm going to remind myself of that too. I hope you enjoyed our chat as much as I did. And thank you again to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for supporting this podcast.